Okay, so Merry Christmas. Thank you. Happy New Year. Is it Happy Epiphany, or is it Blessed Epiphany, or is it Merry Epiphany? Happy Epiphany? Happy Epiphany. Happy Epiphany. Okay, so you guys are the old guard. Okay, we've been doing this for a little bit now. So Epiphany is the realization that you know something now that you didn't know then, and what you know is like wonderful. All right. So we've all had many epiphanies in our life where something clicked. Call them aha moments. I say the international symbol for epiphany. Remember this, Rebecca, is this. Oh, now I know, right? Okay, so this is the day that we celebrate Epiphany. This is the day. And so there's a story that we're going to read about the Magi coming to visit baby Jesus because they had an epiphany. And so as I read through this story, I want you to be asking yourself the question, what is the epiphany of this story that I'm reading? And we'll talk about it at the end. So I'm going to be in Matthew chapter 2. Matthew chapter 2. Starting verse 1. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem, where was Jesus born? Okay, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, who was the king? Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem. Where were the Magi from? Okay, this is east, right? So if the Magi were from the east, that would naturally make you think that Jerusalem was west of them, right? Yes? Okay. Where was Jesus born? Where did the Magi show up at? It's not the same place. Not the same place. Who are the Magi? Well, the Magi were a group of astrologers, for lack of a better word, that were well-versed in healing arts, very disciplined, lots of studies, studied the sky, and somehow in their legend and lore, there was a prophecy of the Messiah, the king that would be born out of Judah, that would be the king of all kings. And so when they saw this particular astrological constellation appear, it checked all of the boxes in their prophetic works, and they said, we got to go. Now, how did this occur there? There is lots written about that and a long story that I'd love to tell you, but I don't have time to tell you tonight, so I'm not gonna. But it wasn't just, oh, hey, maybe we should go to Jerusalem. There was a reason they were watching. A reason they were watching. When they saw the signs, they headed east. Now, verse 2, it says, they arrived in Jerusalem saying, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. So in verse 2, it says, in quotes, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? Who's asking the question? The Magi. Who are they asking the question to? The king. Why? Why? Because they came to find a king. So if the star led them to Jerusalem, and you're going to see a baby king, wouldn't you go see the king to find out about the baby king? I mean, John, the book doesn't say that. I understand that, but the book also doesn't talk about tigers, and I can see tigers. All right, so I know that at some point you got to say, well, this is just logical. They came to see the baby king, and so they went to talk to the king, thinking that it was maybe the king's son that was born, that was the fulfillment of the prophecy that they had in the east. Is this making sense? Verse 4, gathering together all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired, this is King Herod, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. So, King Herod is the king of all Judea, sits on the throne in Jerusalem, and these Magi from the east come and they say, hey, where's the king that was born? And King Herod is looking at his kids, and none of them were born like recently, and so he's like, I'm not sure what you mean. Well, it's prophetic. We saw the sign in the skies. We saw the star that led us to here. Okay, well, let me bring out the chief priests and the scribes. So who do the chief priests and the scribes represent? They represent Judah. They represent Jewish law. They represent the religion. They're the church people. Okay, they represent the religious people that were under the rule of King Herod. So the church people come out. Verse 5, they said to him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for this what was written by the prophet. This is the prophet Micah. And you, Bethlehem, land of Judah, are by no means least among the leaders of Judah, for out of you shall come forth a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod secretly called the Magi and determined from them the exact time the star appeared. Now, anytime you're reading in the Bible, anytime, can you say anytime? Most of the time, when you're reading in the Bible and it says, there was a secret meeting, or there was a secret conversation, or they got together secretly, it usually means they were up to no good, okay? It's a code word that means something not good is about to happen. So, there was a meeting with the Magi that was public. The chief priests were there, the scribes were there, the books were open. The prophet Micah was consulted. The chief priest said, well, yeah, it says right here, he's going to be born in Bethlehem. That's where the Messiah is going to be born. He's going to shepherd all of Israel, the King of Kings. And there's lots of other. So it's interesting here that they came to find a king. King Herod refers to it as a Messiah, and the chief priest, the passage that they choose calls him a shepherd, which means there's other Old Testament prophecy as well that I'm assuming was shared so that you get this other set of titles as they start to refer to Jesus from King, Messiah, Shepherd. But then there's a secret meeting that takes place. In other words, chief priests were gone, scribes were gone. I'm sure the court stenographer lady wasn't there at the moment, and they're having this other conversation. Herod secretly called the Magi and determined from them the exact time the star appeared. Herod sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and search carefully for the child. Okay, I'm going to talk to the moms here real quick. Dads, you don't have to pay attention because I know you don't know the answer to this question. When does a baby become a child? Like, what age is that? Yeah, when do you stop referring to a baby as a baby and start calling it a child? Like after it walks? No? Like older than that, Vic? Potty train is when it would be a child now. Now, Toyle, I've heard you call all your kids babies, and they're like adults, So when you're referring, and I say, hey, we're going to go see the baby, at least I get an image of, like something like a football that's got arms and legs on it. But when you say, hey, we're going to go see the child, I'm thinking, something moving around. Troy, am I crazy, or is that how you think of it too? All right, so in verse 1, it says, Jesus was born in Bethlehem. All right? So when Jesus was born in Bethlehem, he was born a baby. Yes? And then all the way down here, verse 7, or verse 8, Herod sends the Magi to Bethlehem and says, go and search carefully for the child. That makes me think some time has passed. Now, I know that when I go to Walmart to buy the manger scene, it's got baby Jesus and Mother Mary and Joseph, and it's got the shepherds, and it's got the Magi, and it's got like one donkey, one horse, one camel, one cow, all right there, and you kind of put it all around and think. I'm not sure that's accurate. I think the manger scene would be over here at the time of the star and the shepherds singing and the angels and the heavenly host, and the Magi were all the way to the east, and they saw it. But it took them a while to get there. Tracking with that? So some time has passed here, and so Herod sends them to Bethlehem, says, go and search carefully for the child. And when you have found him, report to me so that I too may come and worship him. After hearing the king, they went their way, and the star which they had seen in the east went on before them until it came and stood over the place where the child was. Verse 10 is interesting to me. It says, when they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. Okay, so I'm trying to make all this make sense in my head. They're in the east, and they have some kind of prophecy that says, when we see this, whatever that is, when we see this, we know that the King of Kings has been born, that a Messiah has born, that a wonderful, that will shepherd people, that will rise out of the land of Judah. And so they see something, we're going to call it a star. They see it a star that leads them west. And they arrive at Jerusalem. Why'd they go to Jerusalem? That's where the king was, but it's also where the star was. So the star took them to Jerusalem. They were following the star. Comes to Jerusalem, and they go and see the king and ask about the baby king. And the baby king consults the books, gets the scribes, gets those church people involved, and they open up and they say, well, this was, in Bethlehem is where it's supposed to be. Jerusalem and Bethlehem are not in the same place. Okay, there's a distance there. So Herod's going to send them there, but when they leave there, it says they see the star again. And they follow the star to the house where Jesus was, and they were very joyful about seeing the star again, which I find odd. Did the star appear, lead them, and then go away? And then it came back again, and there's the star. We didn't follow the star. I'm not quite sure how that worked. And so it brings up this question in my head. Where is the child Jesus? I know where baby Jesus was. He was in Bethlehem. But I'm not sure where child Jesus was. Is he not in the manger? Let's put up this map real quick. Okay, so all the way at the top of the map, we're underneath Galilee, a couple dots down, Luke, you see where it says Nazareth? Underneath the L, there's 4 cities. The L of Galilee, the bottom city is Nazareth, right there. Okay, Nazareth is where Mary was 8.5 months pregnant. Joseph came home from work and said, hey, guess what? You're getting on that donkey, and we're going to ride 3 or 4 days down to Bethlehem because I have to register in the census. You guys remember this story, right? So Bethlehem is way down there. Now, the city just to the north of Bethlehem is Jerusalem. So Jerusalem's like 5.5 miles from Bethlehem. So when you're standing on top of the palace. Now, Bethlehem is an elevated city. It's like in the mountains, so to speak. I don't know this for sure, but you get the feeling that if you're on top of the palace or on top of the temple in Jerusalem, you can see Bethlehem. I mean, we've all driven to Colorado where you're like, hey, there's Pikes Peak. And then you drive another 3 hours and you're still not to Pikes Peak because you can see such a great distance. So Bethlehem and Jerusalem are not that far away, but Nazareth is a long way away. So we have this question of where is Jesus? So let's go to Luke 2. Where is child Jesus? Matthew, Mark, Luke. Luke 2. You guys are already there, I get it, but I'm not. Luke 2, verse 20. All right. The shepherds went back glorifying and praising God. All right, so what just happened? Shepherds were out in the fields. The angels showed up, the heavenly host. The shepherds were overjoyed. They went to find baby Jesus, not child Jesus, baby Jesus, and found him in the manger in Bethlehem. Now, remember, why was Mary and Joseph in a manger? Because there was no room in the house, right? There was no room in the house. So into the manger they went. The shepherds show up and tell all of these things to Mary. So in verse 20 it says, the shepherds went back to the fields, glorifying and praising God for all that they had heard and seen, just as had been told them. When 8 days had passed, 8 days passed from what? The birth. When 8 days had passed before his circumcision, his name was then called Jesus, the name given by the angel before he was conceived in the womb. And when the days for their purification according to the law of Moses were completed, that would have been about another 32 days. So we're talking about 40 days after the birth. They brought him up to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. Can we put the map back up for a minute? Okay, so Bethlehem is south of Jerusalem, right? So when the gospel author says they brought him up to Jerusalem, I just want to point out they're technically correct. Jerusalem is north of Bethlehem. So, pet peeve. Hey, we're going to go up to Oklahoma City tomorrow. You want to go? No. That'd be a long drive to go up over the pole and all the way down through South America and come back up to Oklahoma City. So I like the fact that this helps me understand the map. It helps me understand the north and the south and the east and the west. They brought him up to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. As it is written in the law of the Lord, every firstborn male that opens the womb shall be called holy to the Lord. Now, so we know that Jesus was born in Bethlehem, 5.5 miles south of the city, south of Jerusalem. And we know that 40 days after his birth, he went north to Jerusalem to be presented at the temple, because that's the only place the temple was. The temple wasn't in multiple places, it was only there. All right. Does this answer the question yet of where child Jesus was? Am I saying that Jesus was in Jerusalem? Well, what I am saying is that Jesus was in Jerusalem 40 days after his birth. I am saying that. Let's go back to Matthew 2. Verse 11. So they saw, in verse 10, they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly. Verse 11, after coming into the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother. And they fell to the ground and they worshiped him, and opening their treasures, they presented him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now, because of the three gifts, tradition teaches that there was 3 magi. We don't know that for sure. So the group that history thinks that the magi came from would have normally traveled in a group of 12. That would have been the normal way that they moved. Now, I can't say that emphatically, but there's 12 tribes, there's 12 disciples, and it would make sense that there would be 12 magi that are all coming to honor the king. Don't know that for sure. We know there were 3 gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. So the gold is the gift that represents Jesus' kingship. Frankincense was something that you would burn on the altar. It would represent Jesus' priesthood. And myrrh was an oil that would represent Jesus' prophet. How do you make that into a character? His prophet-like abilities. I'm not quite sure how to say that. But it represents the fact that he was a prophet. He anointed and was anointed. The myrrh was the anointing. Verse 12, it says, having been warned by God in a dream not to return to Herod, the Magi left for their own country by another way. Now let's put the map back up real quick. So Herod said, hey, go to Bethlehem and see Jesus and then come back and tell me where he is, because I want to go worship him too. And so the Magi left, followed the star. Doesn't say they went to Bethlehem. It says they followed the star to the house where Jesus was. Maybe it wasn't Bethlehem. Maybe it was in Jerusalem. There are some that think he was in Nazareth. So when I look at the map, if the Magi had a dream that said, go back another way, go east another way to avoid Herod, it wouldn't make any sense to be in Nazareth. Because in Nazareth, they could do whatever they wanted to do up there. King Herod wouldn't have any idea. It's a whole different place. King Herod is down here in Judea. That's up there in Galilee. It's a different place with a different set of rulers. So they could have went north, south, east, west out of Nazareth. King Herod would have no idea. So I'm taking Nazareth and I'm Xing it off the list as a place that child Jesus could have been. So we're talking about Jerusalem or Bethlehem. Now certainly, if the house that Jesus was staying in was in Jerusalem and the Magi went there, I would think that King Herod would maybe have had them followed, find out where they're going, that kind of thing, because it says when they went another way, and when King Herod finds out about this, he's angry. Well, that really makes sense if child Jesus was in Jerusalem. It kind of makes sense if child Jesus is in Bethlehem, because Bethlehem is only 5.5 miles away. I'm going to read verse 16 before I read 13 and 14. When Herod saw that he had been tricked by the Magi, he became very enraged. And he sent and he slew all the male children who were in Bethlehem and all its vicinity, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had determined from the Magi. Shepherds in the field, the angels, the heavenly host, birth of Jesus. Magi, very disciplined, studying their charts, looking into the skies, looking for the sign that would reveal the prophecy. They see it, and they begin the journey. Now, apparently, they told King Herod that they saw the star about 2 years ago. And so it took them about 2 years to get to here, which makes sense that it's not baby Jesus anymore, it's now child Jesus. King Herod decides he's going to kill all the male children in Bethlehem, 2 years old and younger, and in its vicinity. Now, it's 5.5 miles vicinity. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that. Did that mean all of the children, all of the boys that were 2 years old or younger that were born in Jerusalem would have been killed as well? I don't know the answer to that. Verse 13, when the Magi had gone, had left Joseph and Mary and Jesus. When they had gone, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. He said, get up, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt and remain there until I tell you. For Herod is going to search for the child to destroy him. So Joseph got up and took the child and his mother while it was still night, and they left for Egypt. He remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet, out of Egypt I called my son. So what's the epiphany here? Is the epiphany to figure out where child Jesus was? I mean, I gotta admit, that's kind of a cool part of the story for me. Trying to do the detective work, trying to figure that part out. But does it matter if Jesus was in Jerusalem or Jesus was in Bethlehem? No, it doesn't really matter. So what's the Epiphany? What's the, I didn't know that? Well, I think the Epiphany is the three different groups of people. So you have the Magi from the east, you have King Herod, and you have the chief priests and the scribes. You have these three groups of people that all hear the announcement that the king is here, that the king has been born, that the shepherd who will shepherd all of Israel has arrived. And you have three very different reactions. The chief priests, the scribes, the church people. There's no record of them going to visit Jesus, even though they're the ones who opened the book and said, well, Micah said he's born in Bethlehem. So you have this reaction of indifference. You have this reaction of, okay. And then you have King Herod, who feels threatened by the news. And his reaction to the news is violence. I'm going to kill him. And then you have the Magi that come from the east that aren't Jewish, aren't Christian, are pagans, but somehow, some way, recognize the sign in the sky and what it means, are filled with the sense to surrender everything, to give up everything, to go on a long journey, to find the Christ child, to offer gift and sacrifice, and to worship him. That's why they're called wise men. So the Epiphany in this story, the reason why we celebrate it a week or so after Christmas is this. Even today, when the good news of the gospel is presented, people still react in those three ways. I don't care, screw that, or I'll give up everything for it. Think about everybody you know. I mean, everybody you know. And it's one of those three. That's the Epiphany. Amen? Lord in heaven, I love you. Lord, thank you so much for Christmas morning. Thank you for this season. Thank you as we continue to work through the calendar, as we start to think about and point toward Easter. Seems like a long way away, Lord. Seems like a long way away, Lord. Lord, I pray that you prepare our hearts to receive Holy Communion tonight. Would you pray with me? Lord, I confess that I've sinned against you in thought, word, and deed, by what I have done, what I have left undone. Lord, I have not loved you with my whole heart. I have not loved my neighbor as myself. For these things I am sorry. Please forgive me. For the sake of your Son, Jesus, please have mercy on me, that I may delight in your will, walk in your way, bring glory to your name all my days. I love the fact that we have a God who's faithful when we're not, just like the song that we were singing earlier. And that I know that any time during the day or night, I can say, Lord, I've messed up so bad. And oftentimes I hear his voice in a way where he says, yeah, I know. Lord, I'm sorry. Lord, please forgive me. And his book says, if I'm faithful to do that, he is faithful to wash me clean. can't speak for any of you, but there's so many times when I come to him in prayer, that forgiveness prayer, that repentance prayer, where I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed. Lord, I'm praying for the same thing again. I'm embarrassed. And I realize that Satan is clawing at me, trying to get me to feel shame, trying to convince me that it's not even worth asking about. You're just going to do it again. Man, I have to fight through that. I have to fight through that shame. I have to fight through that pressure. Man, when I could get my knees on the floor, my forehead on the carpet, I say, Lord, I'm sorry. Lord, I confess. Every time. Every time. I can feel that blessing. I can feel that blessing. Thank you, Lord Jesus.